What's going on, everyone? This is the Gauntlet New Jersey 2024 Formula Drift. My name is Reese. I'm one of the judges for Formula Drift. And as you can see behind me, we have the track layout. Now, this is the breakdown where we're going to go over a few runs to kind of dissect them and give you a little bit more clarity on why the judges went the way they did.
All right, so today on the breakdown, we're going to be reviewing 3 battles. Now, the 3 battles that we're going to be reviewing are going to be of Chris Forsberg and Robbins. All 3 judges ended up going with Chris Forsberg on the win of that one, but we're going to be reviewing the little bit of a hit that ended up happening there. We're also going to be reviewing Shanahan against Aasbo. They ended up going one more time twice, where the win ended up going with Aasbo. So we're going to be reviewing that and kind of breaking down how that happened. And we're going to be starting today with the prospect battle between Connor O'Sullivan and Corey Talaska. Unanimously, it went with Connor O'Sullivan. So we're going to review the battle and kind of give you guys a little explanation of why we went the way we did. All right.
Look at that. That early lead for Talaska. We'll see if that pays off. And sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Usually it doesn't. Usually it doesn't. Oh, but then...
All right, we see O'Sully coming in. You can see, I think there was a little bit of a mess up there from Talaska coming out of outside zone 2. Goes a little bit late coming out of it. Transitions a little bit late from Talaska. You can see O'Sully going right into outside zone 2. Nice and deep. You can see here that there is a little bit lack of angle. And I'm assuming that he's doing that so he can kind of gain proximity. It doesn't seem like he's really gaining it. You can see O'Sully kind of stretches him a little bit there.
The judge said, hey, just tighten it up here and there.
Here, clip 1. Here comes the transition.
That last outside zone, that car just hops in. You always talk about that. So
We can see there's a little separation.
loosen up that suspension.
From their first battle here, because he did have a lot better.
All right, now we can see O'Sully does a good job getting into outside zone 1. You can see he kind of comes through, sweeps really well. You can see Talaska gets into outside zone 1 a little bit later. I think when he got into outside zone 1, it kind of messed up his line a little bit, because you can see O'Sully is already kind of exiting out of outside zone 1, kind of getting into the right trajectory in order for him to do this transition. You can see Talaska's timing is just a little bit off here. Transition comes a little bit later. Sully's already in, going in, set himself up to go into outside zone 2. Now, we are going to make a note here. We can see Sully's doing a good job getting into outside zone 2, but he's coming in the corner. We do want that to be a little bit deeper, but we also have to play note here that Talaska has done the transition, is pretty much playing catch up at this time, is sacrificing a little bit of angle in order to get that proximity. But as we can see here, I don't know if that proximity is going to come
A little more aggressive
in his favor. You can see Talaska starts to get into outside zone 2 a little bit more. Sully is now fully in, on throttle. Again, we're talking about how Talaska is sacrificing a little bit in angle in order to get proximity, but the proximity just really isn't happening now.
Zone 2 here, and you can see Talaska, kind of the same story in the first battle.
Great inner clip.
A little less
Both drivers really did a good job there.
angle, but
Here comes the
he was a little
transition.
bit closer than that
Going into outside zone 3. Now, we can also pay a note. We can see that O'Sully is not getting into outside zone 3 when we want him to. We want him to be a little bit deeper. Talaska is just following suit.
So he did-
O'Sully now is in outside zone 3. Talaska is also following suit. You can also see there, sacrificing a little bit of angle, try to get the proximity.
there and
But you can see here, there's going to be separation by O'Sully as he extends through, keeping that gap consistent.
outer zone 3.
I want to go over some of the notes that we had here listed. 3 judges here. We have Vernon, and we also have Brian Eggert, myself, kind of give you guys an idea on how I was looking at it. Let me give you a little input and some notes that was going on with Vernon. Now, when it comes to Vernon, he was seeing O'Sully's lead as a mid-track entry. Other than that, it was a solid lead. When it comes to the chase from Talaska, it was a good entry. The transition was slightly too late, so that's what we were talking about, how we saw the transition was a little bit late. He says he straightened up maybe just a little bit, and proximity was average. So although Talaska, from Vernon's point of view, was seeing that he was sacrificing angle a little bit, wasn't able to get the proximity, but he also saw what I saw, which was a little bit of a bad timing coming outside zone 2, trying to get the transition time correctly going into outside zone 1, transition going into outside zone 2. Brian Eggert, he was looking at is O'Sullivan in the lead, gets into outside zone 2. He does a really good job going to outside zone 1, transitions, gets into outside zone 2, maintains the line all the way around. Talaska Gets into position about halfway through the outside zone 2. So we also saw that too. He gets into it, but he also tries to sacrifice a little bit of angle, get the proximity, gets into the outside zone, but isn't able to get that proximity that he was looking for. He gets into it about halfway through, keeps the angle. Both drivers are really good on the inner clip. Oselli fails to get into outside zone 3 correctly, which is something we point out. We want him to be a little bit deeper. Oselli gets out of the edge of outside zone 3, halfway around, and Talaska follows suit. So you can kind of see that Vernon's seeing it pretty much the same way I'm seeing it. Brian is also seeing it the same way I'm seeing it as well too. So we're kind of all on the same boat on that one. Let's see, flip it around. We have Corey in the lead, and we have Connor is going to be in the chase now.
I'm in the map. Here we go. Talaska. Yellow Speed Racing. Big initiation.
Good initiation there.
Entry. Talaska.
Here comes the transition. Sully does a really good job of timing that transition.
Really aggressive.
You can also see here Talaska pretty much doing the same thing that Oselli did, not really getting into outside zone 2 when we want him to, but eventually gets in.
Second outside zone. Dip it back right.
And you can see here, Connor is also sacrificing angle like Talaska did, but he was able to achieve a little bit more proximity. Very important there.
Throw those taillights in there a little further. Oselli can't
Inner
be
clip.
shaken.
Here comes the transition. There comes the dive from Oselli. Talaska does a good job getting into outside zone 3.
Not going anywhere as Oselli.
Beautiful. Now let's see if we can see from the bird's eye view.
Chase, it was really good. He did
Now you can see Talaska does a really good job getting into outside zone 1.
all he could there. And
You can see Oselli does a really good job of maybe setting himself up here. Talaska's getting ready for this transition. Oselli does a really good job of doing this transition, forecasting where the driver is going to be in front of him, in this case Talaska.
with him, awesome transition by O'Sullivan and Talaska.
You see again, Talaska not really getting into outside zone 2 as we wanted him to. Again, Connor did the same thing.
A little late into outer zone 2, but
We can see now that Talaska has gotten into outside zone 2.
O'Sullivan second.
Oselli is definitely sacrificing the angle as Talaska did, but the difference in here is we can see that there's a little bit better proximity, or a lot better proximity on when it comes to Oselli chasing Talaska. Here comes the inner clip. Really good job. Really good job on the inner clip. A lot of smoke there. Here comes the transition. Talaska gets in. You can see Oselli drops back, gets into position, closes the gap.
To keep that approximation to Talaska in the outer zone 3. So good job on.
Now, Vernon in this situation, when he saw that Talaska's lead, he saw outside zone 1 started to deviate a little bit in the middle. Outside zone 2, he was kind of mid-zone, so he kind of saw what we were looking at, getting a little bit late, taking more of a mid-zone. The inner clip was good, he says, and outside zone 3 was just okay. He could have been a little bit deeper. That's coming from Vernon. Now, when it comes to the chase from Oselli, overall, it was a better chase. He believes he was on a righter line, and it was decent proximity. Brian Eggert, when he was looking at this, Talaska initiates around the same place as Oselli did. He also does a long e-brake pull, enters the same line as O'Sullivan, and then Talaska enters outside zone 2, the same as Oselli. So the same little error that Oselli had, Talaska also had as well too. Oselli has better proximity than Talaska in the chase, but at the cost of a shallower line and angle. Talaska enters outside zone 3, similar to Oselli leads, and he also has a good transition, gains proximity, ends up running a shallower line. So we're all kind of seeing it the same here. Although they had good leads, when it comes down to this chase, the proximity was better on Oselli. And the reason that I'm able to gather from what I saw and from what the other judges were seeing is that they both made a sacrifice, which was angle. They made the sacrifice of angle to gain the proximity. Now, obviously, we want them to have the angle and the proximity, but we're looking at this battle. When we look at the lead runs, we're like, okay, that's decent. We also looked at the transition that Oselli did, which was a better timing of the transition, was able to get him a little bit closer. The proximity overall in the chase for Oselli was better, and I think that's the general consensus of all three judges had, including myself. Really great battle. Talaska put a hell of a fight up, but Oselli was just able to edge him out with better proximity in the chase in this particular battle. So really good job by them. Really fun to watch that battle.
Both parties, but I feel
we're going to move on to the next one.
O'Sullivan machine is
Ultimately here, all three judges ended up going with Oselli. Now, moving on to pro. We have this battle. These battles were crazy. All right. The first battle then ended up going one more time. Second battle ended up going one more time. And the two drivers that I'm talking about are Connor Shanahan and Frederick Aasbo. This was a hell of a way to see battles. It was just amazing. So let's jump right into it. This is the last one more time, the deciding battle. All three judges ended up going with Aasbo in this case. So let's watch this battle and then kind of give you guys a little bit feedback on why we went the way we did. All right, Connor does the initiation. Really good into outside zone 1. Good transition. Really good job getting to outside zone 2. Now I want to pay really close attention here. Happy we're reviewing this battle now. As we saw before with O'Sully and with Talaska, we saw that there was a lot more of this, more of like a Y shape. In this situation, we can see that Aasbo does a really good job of keeping the proximity and he keeps angle. That's what we talked about, especially in the driver's meeting. We don't want to see the Y action. We want to see a little bit closer right into that pocket there. And you can see Frederick is doing a really good job of staying in the pocket while following Connor. Connor doing a fantastic job in the lead. Good inner clip. Here comes the transition. Nice and deep into outside zone 3. But Frederick is right there with him. Now we're going to see the replay here. Now, right before we go into the replay, I just want to touch on a couple of notes. Vernon saw this so far as Shanahan the lead, near perfect lead run. Could be a little bit deeper in the zones to have it 100%, but he thought he did an amazing lead. Aasbo in the chase, loved how he was matching angle. He was a little bit shallow in outside zone 1. Other than that, it was a great chase. So I agree. It was an amazing battle. It was a great chase. It was awesome. I mean, what more could you ask for there? Edgar was definitely looking at like Shanahan had a great job getting into outside zone 1. Aasbo did a great job of matching angle and not far off of matching the line. So we can see here that although all of us were very impressed with the lead from Connor Shanahan, we were equally as impressed on how Frederick was able to keep the proximity and keep the angle while chasing him, and which was crucial and very important. So let's see, we can watch the replay here, see a little bit of that. We can see Connor gets well into outside zone 1. You can see Aasbo. I do agree with Vernon that Aasbo was not quite in there. A little bit of separation. Leaves a little bit early. Here comes the transition. Connor's just so good with that transition. Beautiful job. Aasbo does a really good job doing the transition as well too. Gets into the pocket as well. And this is where it starts to go down. Good proximity, good angle, matching the line, looking really good all the way around. Amazing. Let's see the inner clip. Inner clip was beautiful by Connor and by Frederick. Here comes the transition going into outside zone 3. Connor does a great job in the lead again. Fantastic job. Gets into outside zone 3. But we see right there, Aasbo, good angle, good proximity, isn't sacrificing anything. Gets closer, and the end their battle right there. So, or the end that run right there. It was intense. Now we're going to flip it around. Do a job going into outside zone 1. Here comes the transition. That is amazing. Now, this was an amazing transition. Trust me, it's not something that any of us overlooked. We were wowed by this transition. Dives right into the pocket. That's just amazing stuff. You can see Aasbo does a really good job of setting himself up to get into outside zone 2, and Connor does an amazing job of forecasting and getting right into the pocket, matching angle and matching proximity. Now, from this point forward, we are going to see a little bit of a separation, I believe. And this is what we were talking about before. We don't really want to see the Y. We want to see a little bit more matching angle and keeping the proximity there, something that all of us talked about in the driver's meeting. You can see here, Aasbo doing a good job staying into outside zone 2. Connor doing a good job of keeping the proximity, not taking anything away from that. Touching them. Here comes the inner clip. Amazing. Dive again. There you can also see a little bit sacrificing angle in order to get that proximity. Proximity is there. He is sacrificing a little bit of something in order to get something else. In this case, he was sacrificing angle in order to get that proximity. But we also can see that that's something Frederick wasn't doing. A lot better there. An amazing battle. Now, I don't know if he mimicked. I mean, I viewed it like he wasn't mimicking the angle like Aasbo did. Now, let's just, before we get into that battle here, let me just go over a little bit of the notes here. We do have Vernon that chimed in, wanted to speak on this as well too. Now here, Vernon looks at it. Aasbo's lead was near perfect. He has nothing to complain about the lead from Aasbo. I agree with that. Brian was agreeing with that. It was just all three of us were like, this was an amazing lead. Now, when it comes to the chase, all right, we can all agree on, you can see Vernon was here saying sacrificing angle in order to stay close. That's something that I was viewing it that way. That was something that Brian was viewing as well, Brian Eggert, myself. An amazing job here. We can see that Aasbo gets into outside zone 1 amazingly. We absolutely understand that Connor did an amazing job here doing this transition, not taking anything away from him. At this point, it's looking really good for Connor. But as we start going through here, we can see that all three judges have already stated, including myself, that we do see that there is a huge sacrifice on angle in order to get the proximity. He did get the proximity, that we're not taking away. But when we were watching the first half of the run, we can see that Aasbo was able to keep the proximity and keep the angle, where here we can see a little bit of a Y, and that's what we wanted. We go back. It's a whole other ball game there. There is a good example where you can see Aasbo keeps the angle and also keeps the proximity, which is something we were explicitly asking the drivers, meaning, hey, listen, we don't want to see that. We want to see closer proximity and keeping the angle. It was a really good battle between both drivers, but ultimately, when we reviewed all the footage, we were able to see, like we said, the proximity and the discipline of line, matching the angle was just superior when it came to Aasbo, and that's why he ultimately got the win in this one. It was an amazing battle. Like I said, they went one more time twice, but this was ultimately the deciding factor on why Aasbo got the win. Now, let's move on to the next battle, which is going to be Chris Forsberg and Alec Robbins. Now, the reason we're reviewing this is because there was a collision that happened, and we want to kind of explain why one of the judges went one way and why two of the judges went the other way when it came to who was at fault for the collision. Now, ultimately, Chris Forsberg ended up getting the win. We ended up putting the blame on Alec Robbins. It was 2 judges to 1, so that ended up how that going. And we're going to kind of explain why we ended up going that direction. So we're going to watch the beginning of this battle. We're going to watch the collision, then we're going to replay it and kind of give a little input on why we went the way we did. All right, Forsberg comes in, gets into outside zone 1. Here comes the transition. Alec right behind him. And we have collision there. Forsberg ends up going off track. At this point, the guys are just trying to stay in it, trying to get through, because it was something that was stated by the judges. If there's collision, make sure you go through, stay on throttle, and keep drifting. Now, obviously, we saw that there was collision. Let's break down how one of the judges saw it differently opposed to the other 2 judges that saw it a different way. Now, before we get into the battle here, definitely want to state that we do see Chris going into outside zone 1. We see him do a transition. That transition, after the transition has happened, he's allowed to do a decel, because there is a decel before going into outside zone 2. Now, I do want to speak a little bit on the notes here that Vernon had. For him, all right, Vernon was one of the the judge that ended up going shared fault. So he put blame on Alec and he put blame on Forsberg for that collision. As he stated here, for me, in order for Forsberg to have had an ideal lead run that we were looking for, he would have had to have a little bit deeper in outside zone 1 and to have that transition just a little bit earlier toward the end of outside zone 2. In my opinion, based on the decel map, Forsberg should have been on throttle from the start of outside zone 2. As for Robbins, he was on a shallower line at the edge of outside zone 1, causing him to make a transition that was at a different spot than Forsberg, causing Robbins to cut outside zone 2 even more, and in that case it went into shared fault. When it came to Brian Eggert, Forsberg getting to outside zone 1 was pretty good. Could have been a little bit deeper. Where Robbins was approaching outside zone 1 clearly wasn't in the zone. All right, Robbins actually starts to do the transition before Forsberg, and this is going to set him up on a transition way on the inside of Forsberg line that ultimately, in his eyes, caused a collision. That's also something how I viewed it as well too. We're going to see here.
Yeah, so I want to see.
We all agree he could probably get a little bit deeper into outside zone 1. Comes out. Now we do see. Let's just back up a little bit here. Let's pay a close eye on Alec. Alec is blowing outside zone 1 completely. So he is already on the inside line. So being on the inside line is already setting you up incorrectly to go into outside zone 2. And when the transition happens, by nature is going to put you on a tighter line, and it's going to make you end up cutting going into outside zone 2, carrying more speed, and the trajectory going in there is going to be faster. Now you can see here, you can kind of see just a little bit. Transition is already happening way on the inside. Forsberg is where he needs to be doing the transition. Transition happened. Now, at this point that the transition has happened, Forsberg is allowed to decel a little bit there. Now, you can see a little bit of a surge from Alec coming in here. We start seeing Forsberg get on the throttle. The hit ends up happening. They end up putting Forsberg off track, dropping a tire. And we see the hit go down. Now, let's back it up a little bit more. Now, like we stated before, Vernon looked at it like if Forsberg would have been able to light off here, he doesn't think that there would have been any incident. So because Forsberg didn't light off at this position out of outside zone 2, he put that blame shared fault, because he also says, well, Robbins also didn't come on the right line. He also did a transition a little bit early, cut the line, and that put him also coming in really hot. And it'd be shared fault with Forsberg not lighting off when he needed to, and then Robbins coming in a little bit too hot is what caused this incident to happen. In Vernon's eyes, it was shared fault. Now, in Brian's eyes, he just looked at it like Brian looked at it like Alec was just way on the inside, transitioned incorrectly, put him on an inside eye, and that trajectory was put him right into Forsberg. Myself, I look at it like the same as Brian Eggert, where I feel like Alec Robbins was a little bit on the inside, miscalculated the transition, having him go into this right here, and then causing this accident, as we're seeing here. Now, I know a lot of people are saying, hey, listen, like, what's the deal with him lighting off? Now, the way I viewed it is he carried a lot of momentum going into outside zone 2. So there isn't a decel going on there. And a lot of people say, hey, listen, I didn't see him light off. That's a decel. There should be an error there. I kind of view it, from my perspective. The transition happened. He settled his car. There was enough momentum to carry him into outside zone 2. I don't see a decel there in any aspect. He is carrying momentum going into that zone. I think Alex just maybe miscalculated a little bit and just came in with way too much speed and ended up clipping him there. Again, this is just one of those situations where us as judges have to look at everything and make a decision. And in this case, two of the judges ended up going with putting the blame on Alec Robbins, and one of the judges ended up saying that it was shared fault. Obviously, majority is what went there, and the blame ended up going on Alec Robbins for this battle here. Now we can see the rest of it there. Forsberg gets hit off. He goes off course. You can see it go here. You can see Alec way on the inside. The transition is already happening. That's also going to put him on way on the inside here, because that's just the way that works. Gets on throttle. You can see he's already starting to surge in on the inside, and then ultimately comes the hit here. Again, two ways of looking at it. Two of the judges looked at it like, hey, listen, we think that Alec was coming in too hot. One of the other judges looked at it like, hey, listen, I feel like if Forsberg would have lit off and Alec would have been a little bit more composed, we wouldn't have had that incident, and I'm going to go with shared fault. Again, this is a judge sport. I know some people may disagree, other people may agree, but we just wanted to give a little clarity to what ended up happening in this and why we ended up going with the decision that we did when it came to the blame. Ultimately, in this battle, they ended up going again for the second half of the battle. And Forsberg, Alec actually ended up putting an amazing lead run down, but Forsberg ended up going with the win because coming back now from that deficit of having the blame on him from the first part of the battle was just too much for him to overcome, even though Alec did an amazing lead run. So that's pretty much what wrapped it up there. Ultimately, based on that, after watching this half of the battle and watching the second half of the battle, all three judges unanimously went with Forsberg for the win based off of what the decision was that Alec was at fault for the collision. That wraps it up right there. I really hope you guys enjoyed a little bit of the explanation here. Put some comments on the bottom. Let us know what you guys think, how we can improve, what other battles you want to see, a different format or anything like that at all. Really enjoy being able to do these breakdowns and give some clarity to all you guys. And we're going to try to just upgrade it more and more as we go on and give you guys a little bit more clarity as much as we can. So make sure you guys like and subscribe. And thanks for checking out the breakdown, and we'll see you next time.